Have you ever heard of a condition where someone develops painful, disproportionate areas of fat, usually in their limbs, only to be told it's just regular weight gain? It's a deeply frustrating reality for so many, mainly women. Well, today, we're going to peel back the layers on this medical mystery and uncover a really surprising and frankly critical link to another major chronic pain disorder.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about this painful, misunderstood condition. Then we'll get into exactly what lipedema is. After that, we'll look at a major clue involving something called central sensitization. Then we'll explore the huge overlap between lipedema and fibromyalgia, check out the lymphatic connection, and wrap it all up with a call for why awareness is so important.
You know, this is the question that's really at the heart of it for so many people. It's that gut feeling that something's just not right. That the pain, the swelling, it's more than what you're being told. And that feeling, that's often the very first step on the long road to getting a real answer. Okay, so take a look at this. This image really shows one of the classic visual signs of a condition called lipedema. You can see how the tissue in the upper arm is disproportionately large. This isn't just typical body fat from obesity. It's a very specific pattern of fat building up, and it brings a whole host of unique and often very painful symptoms with it.
The symptoms themselves can be pretty confusing. The areas are often super tender, actually painful if you press on them, and they bruise from just the smallest bump. One of the biggest clues for doctors is something called the cuff sign, where the swelling goes down to the ankles or wrists but just stops. It completely spares the feet and hands. And another huge piece of the puzzle is that these symptoms tend to pop up or get way worse during big hormonal shifts, like puberty or pregnancy.
All right, let's really dive in and get the official medical definition, because understanding what lipedema is on a tissue level is the key to understanding why it's so incredibly different from just being overweight.
So here's the absolute crucial part of that definition. It's a disease of fibrotic, loose connective tissue. What does that mean in plain English? We're not just talking about extra fat cells. We're talking about tissue that's inflamed, that's structurally different, and that's on its way to becoming scarred and hardened. This is exactly why just dieting and exercise often does absolutely nothing to reduce it.
And this isn't a static thing. It gets worse over time, and it happens in stages. In stage 1, the skin might still look pretty smooth, but underneath, you can feel these little pearl-sized nodules. By stage 2, the surface of the skin gets all uneven and dimpled. That's because the fibrosis is literally starting to pull the skin inward. Then in stage 3, the tissue gets much harder. You see these large lobes of fat, and the risk of developing secondary lymphoedema, that's major swelling from a blocked lymphatic system, goes way up.
This brings us to what is, for many, the absolute worst part of this condition, the pain. I mean, why on earth would fat tissue hurt this much? Well, the answer, it turns out, might not be in the tissue itself. It might be in our own nervous system.
Yeah, researchers are pointing to something called central sensitization. The best way to think about it is like your central nervous system has a volume knob for pain. With central sensitization, that knob gets stuck on max volume. This leads to something called allodynia, which is when something that should feel normal, like a light touch or even your clothes brushing against your skin, feels incredibly painful.
This quote, wow, it just completely reframes the whole problem, doesn't it? It tells us that to really get a handle on the pain of lipedema, we have to look past the limbs and start looking at the brain and the spinal cord. The nervous system itself becomes part of the disease.
And that clue, that focus on the nervous system and central sensitization, well, it leads us right to an incredible, significant overlap with another chronic pain condition that you're probably very familiar with, fibromyalgia.
So a 2023 study came out with a number that just made jaws drop. In a group of women who already had a lipedema diagnosis, get this, nearly 40% of them also met the full diagnostic criteria for fibromyalgia. That is not a small overlap. That is a massive connection, and it suggests there's something really deep going on between these two conditions.
And when you look at this table, it all starts to make sense. Just look at the similarities. Both conditions have high rates of allodynia, that crazy pain from just a light touch. And even though the main pain location is different, with fibro being more widespread, that shared feature of a hypersensitive pain response is just undeniable.
And the impact this has on people's lives is it's profound. As you can see from this chart, the pain scores for the group with both conditions are way higher than for those with just one or the other. It's a truly devastating combination that can just crush a person's quality of life. But wait, the story doesn't stop with the nervous system. To really get the full picture, we have to look at another critical and honestly often overlooked system in our body that seems to be tangled up in this web of conditions.
Let's talk about the lymphatic system. This is your body's incredible drainage and waste disposal network. A big theory right now is that in lymphedema, this system is just not working right, and when that fluid can't get cleared out properly, it builds up in the tissues. That contributes to the swelling, the inflammation, and eventually that fibrotic hardening of the fat cells. It's kind of like a slow-motion flood happening inside your own tissues.
And this link between the lymphatic system and connective tissue seems to be a common thread. A really high number of women with lipedema are also hypermobile, double-jointed. This connects it to a whole family of related syndromes, like Ehlers-Danlos, which is a connective tissue disorder, fibromyalgia, which we've been talking about, and even ME/CFS, or chronic fatigue syndrome. It really starts to look like we're dealing with a whole spectrum of overlapping disorders, not just separate diseases.
So what's the takeaway from all this? Understanding all these complex connections is more than just a cool science lesson. It has profound, real-world implications for millions of patients who are just desperate for answers and some relief.
So, while there's no magic cure, there is management. And when you think about what we just discussed, the treatments make total sense. Manual lymphatic drainage helps that broken drainage system. Compression garments give support from the outside, and soft tissue work can help break up that fibrosis. It's all about reducing the burden of the disease and helping people function better.
And this, right here, is the bottom line. This is why getting the right diagnosis is so incredibly critical. A patient who's just told they're obese might be pushed toward a diet that won't ever work for this kind of tissue. But a patient who is correctly identified with lipedema and maybe also comorbid fibromyalgia can get therapies that actually target the real problems, the lymphatic dysfunction and the central sensitization. It can literally change their entire life.
Which kind of leaves us with one last big question to think about. We tend to study these illnesses in their own little boxes, lipedema over here, fibromyalgia over there. But what if this massive overlap between them isn't a coincidence? What if it's the key? Maybe, just maybe, by unraveling the mysteries of one, we'll find the threads that lead to breakthroughs for all of them.